Hello. It's been a minute because my camera sucked and I tried using my phone, but that is also clapped out is a phrase I learned recently. So here I am, and we're gonna go over the human figure, and there'll be a few different chunks of this, but we're gonna start with the basics. And a word about the basics is if you're like me, you constantly convince yourself that you don't need the basics and you just skip to the detailed stuff, and takes a lot longer to go back and unlearn the bullshit that you thought was better than the basics that they tried to teach you in the first place. So I recommend sticking with this because it will help you draw figures and then learn proportion, and it'll help you draw from imagination in the long run. So when we're drawing figures, we're going to start with three boxes, and three boxes represent the head, the rib cage, and hips. I kind of make this like an underwear shaped box just because it's easier for me, but you can do a square box, it doesn't matter. Um, and so the angle at which we see these boxes kind of determines the posture. So what I do next is, now that we have this, I find the spine. And the spine runs down the center of each of these boxes. But remember that there's also, so I'm going to trace the same figure. I'll show you what I was about to say. So I trace that, and the spine runs down the center of it, and it's important to remember that it's the center of the back. So if it seems like it's supposed to be over here because it's the center of the box, remember that it is the center of the back, so that might affect where your spine lays out along your boxes. The next step is to find the center of gravity, and this is kind of a thing to like just kind of practice. You'll get a feel for it pretty easily, but basically the best thing I can tell you is like if you kind of, this is where imagination actually does come into play with actual work, is that you kind of imagine where this person's weight is distributed. And so one leg, if it's holding, if you define like, okay, I decide that this leg goes here, you're automatically assigning where the weight is being distributed. So this looks like this figure is kind of lunging forward. And so in order for this to balance, I consider this to be the center of gravity. It has to be something that looks like it would distribute the weight. It's a little awkward. I'll do different legs, but yeah, mess with your center of gravity, and this will solve the problem of if you find that your characters or your objects kind of float throughout space. This could be your issue, is finding where that weight needs to be. So I'm deciding that it's here, but we're going to give it a regular situation. Next, what we're going to do is these points. So the corners of boxes pinpoint where your joints will be. And so I actually have it here in blue as well. So top corners are shoulders, and then halfway down is elbow. I usually gauge an arm to be where the wrist meets like right around the halfway point of the thigh. So that's how I generally decide how long arms are. So another arm, elbow. All right, and another point is so with legs, a lot of people when they're beginning, they tend to draw the legs coming straight down from the middle of the pelvis, and while our flesh is there, we build from the basics, and this is where the femur pops in. So the femur comes in from the side of the hip. Knee, it's kind of a high knee. And so you can tell that this hip is higher than this one, so there's kind of a weight distribution. So this one probably has less weight on it. Again, coming from the side, knee, I'll do this. And then from there, you can kind of flesh it out. So I'm going to go and trace this figure. So this is just a summary of what these things were. I use this grip because many know that I have had wrist issues, and this helps because oftentimes I would like grip this to death, and this prevents that. It distributes the weight a little bit more. So I'm going to trace this figure. The 3 boxes. Joint, 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 joint. I always, when I'm sketching, feet are always just triangles. It's just easy. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to trace the spine. The spine goes in the center of the back stuff. So, same figure, just a little bit more fleshed out. Box. Box. And then this is the kind of finalized figure. So I would recommend trying that out several times. Definitely think that repetition after information is provided is the best way to retain it. So if you can discipline yourself to do like 10 to 15 of these before we move on, you can watch the whole thing, but I do recommend putting yourself through this because it will help you and it will solidify that sort of pattern, so you don't need to like think about it as much next time you go for it. So I'm going to pause and then reset, and we'll talk about other stuff. So like I said, repetition is a great way to solidify and broaden your skills for when you're drawing anything later. I recommend the same way that we're talking about the angles of the boxes, try different, more dramatic angles. Even if you end up putting up boxes that don't make logical sense, continue the posture just so you can see what it looks like and why it looks wrong, because it helps just as much as getting it right. And that's, yeah, definitely one thing is the more you mess up, the more you're capable of learning from it. So we'll think about that. So I have my boxes. I'll put my joints up. So joint, there's a joint. You can do a light dot or no dot at all, but I like doing like a kind of marker for where it would be if the torso was see-through. So shoulder, spine, the back of the center. So this is kind of an example of what I was talking about with it being in the back, because if this was down the center of each shape, it would be right here, but it's obviously in the back because it's a spine. So we have that, and then a joint, and a joint, and we'll make this person jump in. See, like this is already kind of messed, like these shoulders are not realistic, but I'm going to keep going with it. So this, you see the top of this box, and so if this is the top, then it means that it's tilted forward, and if the pelvis is tilted forward, it's probably jumping forward. So that kind of informs what the posture should end up looking like. So jump in. So if this is like this, you can still kind of find the center of gravity. It'd be like kind of where they left off. So we'll say that they're launching off this leg. You can kind of almost tell how much force they used in order to get themselves off the ground. Do another one. I'm sorry, I hope this autofocus thing isn't too annoying. Let me know if it is. So again, we're seeing the top of the pelvis and the bottom of the rib cage. So they're folding. I'm going to give this one a different one though. We're just going to make this person very sassy. So the spine runs down the back in the center. Shoulder. Shoulder over here. Hip. Invisible hip over here. Okay, so this person's going to have a raised arm. We'll talk about body language in another video, but raised arms suggest impatience or irritation or being bothered or stressed out. But so this person, hand on the hip. Let's see, so center of gravity. Right around here. So we're going to give them a big butt. We're going to have most of the weight being held on this foot, so that this foot can be slightly more expressive in the pose. And we'll have this person flip us off. I'll have another video just for hands too, but not right now. As you get more comfortable with the boxes, you can kind of replicate or replace them with a little bit more complicated shapes, but I will show you. So this shape I have, it's the face obviously, but if I was to draw a box around it, it's the box that would contain this entire shape. So that's where that goes. Rib cage and pelvis. And this is a sitting pose. So still the spine goes down the center and the back joint. Okay, I'm going to talk about the characteristics of gender, and again, we're not talking specifically sex, but in objective art terms, in order to make something look more feminine, you apply more curves, and if you want it to look more masculine, you think of more angles and edges. But I absolutely recommend trying out different combinations of features. But what I'm going to do to kind of express this is the same figure and same pose, but one with curves. And so it's once you figure draw or do figure drawing for long enough, you kind of pick up on repeated shapes that most bodies have. But I'll show you where the boxes would be. So box and a box and a box. But I'm going to erase that so we can focus on the curves. So can kind of rely on that hourglass shape. Give her some bodacious hips. Boobs are teardrops. Like, don't draw spheres, don't draw bowls. They're teardrops because they're sacks of fat. So imagine sacks of fat hanging off your chest. Mm-hmm. Okay, curvy, and the same pose, same position of the boxes. The chest is triangular. Squares and triangles and diamonds. Their hip area is pretty boxy, I find. And again, this isn't like all masculine figures have this shape or anything like that. This is just talking about the basics of what makes a figure look masculine versus feminine. Get that friggin' cool guy Ken doll lump. And we'll do the same thing with a different figure. So, box. 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 Just some boxes. Spine down the back. And curves. Curves. Curve. Meat bag. Fat bag. Curve. And you'll find that, like, not everyone's like this, but I learned the long way that, like, I tried so hard to make it look complex and detailed that if you can get a figure with like 3 lines, it's the most satisfying figure because it has a natural curving shape to it. Or a natural angular shape, you know. And some hair. Her other arm's laid back here somewhere. Alright, cool. And the same figure. Kind of triangular torso again. And boxy butt. Rectangular legs. And a diamond calf. Cool. So we'll stop there for this one, and I'll be back for facial expression.